Here is something most people do not realize when they reach their 50s. The feeling that your life no longer fits you is not a crisis, and it is not a personal failure. It is often a signal of growth coming from the brain, even though it rarely feels that way at first. Most of us expect real problems to look dramatic. We wait for a breakdown, a loss, a clear external reason that would explain why something feels wrong. But what happens much more often in midlife is quieter and harder to name. On the outside, life looks fine, stable, reasonable, sometimes even successful by all the usual standards. And yet, inside, something feels off. Claire is 52. She lives in the suburbs, her children have left home, she has a stable office job, and her husband is still by her side. Nothing in her life is falling apart. There is no obvious crisis. And still, every Sunday evening, she feels a familiar heaviness in her chest. It is not panic and not sadness. It is a subtle resistance to the week ahead, a feeling she cannot quite explain, but cannot ignore either. For a long time, Claire tells herself that this is normal. She reminds herself to be grateful. She tells herself that this is simply what adulthood looks like after a certain age. But the feeling does not go away. That is because this feeling is not a complaint and not a sign of weakness. It is information. As we move through midlife, the brain quietly changes the questions it asks. In our 20s and 30s, the focus is usually on survival, stability, and building something solid. In our 50s, a different kind of check begins to happen. The brain starts looking for alignment. It asks whether this life still reflects who you are now, and whether your days still make sense to the person you have become. When the answer is no, the signal appears, not as a clear thought and not as a neat explanation, but as discomfort, restlessness, and a sense of living slightly out of sync with yourself. Many people mistake this for ingratitude or restlessness, but it is neither. This book is not about throwing your life away, and it is not about starting over. It is about understanding why a life can stop feeling right even when nothing is technically wrong. And it is about learning how to listen to that signal calmly, without panic, without guilt, and without destroying everything you have built. Chapter 1. The Silent Symptoms. What your body says when life doesn't fit. There is a particular kind of silence that fills a Sunday evening in a suburban home when everything is exactly as it should be. The house is quiet. The dinner dishes are washed. The week ahead is manageable. And yet Claire sits on the edge of her bed at 9 o'clock at night, and something in her chest feels tight. It is not dramatic. It is not the kind of feeling that sends you to an emergency room or makes you cancel plans. It is subtle enough that she can function through it, get through the workday, have conversations with her husband, spend time with her adult daughter when she visits. But it is there. A low current running underneath the surface of her life, a kind of weight that sits just behind her sternum and does not quite go away. When you ask people in their 50s what this feeling is, they often cannot name it. They say things like, "I'm tired," or "I think I'm stressed," or "I'm probably just ungrateful." They offer explanations that feel safe. They blame the world, the job market, inflation, aging parents. They blame themselves, not working hard enough, not being disciplined enough, not being strong enough. What they rarely do is sit with the feeling itself and ask what it might actually mean. But here is something researchers have learned by following people across decades of their lives. The Harvard Grant Study, which tracked the health and happiness of the same people from their 20s into their 90s, found something that surprises most people. The onset of unhappiness in midlife is not usually caused by circumstance. It is not caused by divorce, job loss, or failure. It is caused by misalignment. When your day-to-day life stops reflecting the person you have become, your brain notices. And it tells you through discomfort, restlessness, and a kind of low-level dread that you cannot quite justify but cannot ignore either. Think of it this way. You were built as a human being with an internal compass. It points toward things that matter to you, things that feel true to who you actually are. When you are young, that compass is often buried under urgent tasks. You are building, surviving, proving something to the world or to yourself. The compass is there, but you do not have time to listen to it carefully. Life is too loud. But at some point, usually around the middle of your life, the noise changes. The urgent tasks are still there, but there are fewer of them. The survival mode eases up a little bit. And that is when you start to notice that your compass and your life are pointing in different directions. That is when the tightness appears. Claire's compass, for instance, points toward autonomy and creativity. It always has. When she was younger, she wanted to be an artist. But practical matters intervened. She needed stable income, security, a respectable path. She got a job in office administration. It was reasonable. It was stable. It paid the bills. For decades, she told herself that stability was more important than creative fulfillment. She told herself this was what adulthood meant. And because she told herself this often enough, she began to believe it. But the compass never actually changed. It was still there, still pointing toward something she had set aside. By the time she reached 52, she had spent 30 years managing spreadsheets and calendars, and her internal sense of what mattered had been quietly accumulating an enormous amount of pressure, not the kind of pressure that explodes into a crisis. The kind that settles in and makes you feel like you are slowly disappearing. This is what researchers call cognitive dissonance. It is the uncomfortable gap between who you actually are and who your daily life allows you to be. It does not matter if your life looks fine on paper. It does not matter if you have security, family, a decent job. When the gap is large enough, your body knows it. Your nervous system knows it. Even when your mind is trying to convince you that you should be grateful and content, your body is sending a different message. The symptoms are not always obvious. Sometimes it is the Sunday night dread that Claire experiences. Sometimes it is insomnia that no doctor can quite fix. A chronic exhaustion that no amount of rest quite touches. A kind of emotional numbness where things that should make you happy do not quite reach you. Sometimes it is a vague sense of anxiety without a clear cause. Sometimes it is restlessness, a feeling that you should be doing something else, being someone else, living in a way that does not yet have a shape or a name. What all of these have in common is that they do not respond well to the usual solutions. Rest does not fix them. A vacation might help for a week or two, but the feeling returns. Talking to a therapist might help you process your emotions, but it does not change the underlying situation. That is because these symptoms are not actually problems to be solved. They are messages. Your body is trying to tell you something. It is trying to tell you that the size of your life no longer fits who you have become. Not because you have failed, and not because something is wrong with you, but because you have grown. You are different now than you were. Your values have shifted. Your understanding of what matters has deepened. And the life that made sense to the person you were does not quite make sense to the person you are. When Claire finally sits with this thought, something shifts. Not everything changes immediately. Her job is still her job. Her house is still her house. Her marriage is still her marriage. But something inside her relaxes just a little bit because she stops fighting the feeling. She stops trying to convince herself that she should be grateful and happy with things as they are. She allows herself to acknowledge that maybe this feeling is not a sign of weakness or selfishness. Maybe it is actually information. Maybe her body is trying to help her. This is the opening. This is where real change begins. Not with action, not with grand decisions, but with listening, with pausing and allowing yourself to hear what you have been trying to ignore. Reflection, pause. Right now, pause for a moment. Do not force an answer. Simply notice. Where in your life do you feel tightness? Is it in your work, in your home, in your marriage or close relationships? In the way you spend your days? In something that is harder to name, just a general sense that something does not quite fit anymore? You do not need to answer out loud or write anything down. Just mentally notice. Because that tightness is information too. And your job over the next chapters is simply to learn what it is trying to tell you. Chapter 2. You're not broken, your old life story. Is there a particular moment in someone's life when they stop blaming the world and start blaming themselves? It usually happens around the time they reach their mid-50s. The job is still the job. The relationship is still the relationship. But instead of thinking, the system is broken, or nobody understands me, they begin to think something closer to, I must be broken. This shift in thinking is almost universal, and it is almost always wrong. Claire had her version of this moment about 6 months ago. She was sitting across from a therapist. Not because anything had explicitly fallen apart, but because she felt like something inside her had. She was looking for someone to fix her, to explain why she could not simply be content with her life like everyone else seemed to be. She had read self-help books. She had tried meditation apps. She had gone to the gym with more discipline than ever before. And still, the feeling of being out of place in her own life would not go away. The therapist, after listening for a while, said something that surprised her. What if nothing is broken? What if you are simply in a different chapter than you were 20 years ago, and your life script has not caught up yet? This is a concept that the American Psychological Association has documented extensively. When researchers studied the lives of people in their 50s and 60s, they found that about 68% of them were still living according to a life script that was written in their 20s and 30s. Not deliberately, not consciously. But the patterns had set in so deep that they had become invisible. The career path that made sense when you were 30, the relationships you built to avoid loneliness, the values you absorbed from your parents or your culture. All of it was still running the show, even though the person running it was no longer quite who they used to be. Think about what happens in your 20s. If you are average, you are focused on a few core things: survival, stability, and belonging. You need to figure out how to support yourself. You need a job. You need a place to live. You probably need to feel that you are not entirely alone. These are not shallow desires. They are fundamental human needs. And the person you were in your 20s was wise to prioritize them. Your 20-year-old self created a system, a structure, a way of being in the world that met those needs. The problem is that the person you are now, the 50-something person sitting on the edge of a bed on a Sunday night, has different needs. This is not a failure of character. This is not you being ungrateful or selfish. It is what neuroscience calls neuroplasticity. Your brain has been shaped by decades of experience. You have learned things. You have changed. You have become wiser in some ways and more aware of what actually matters to you. But your life structure, the job, the neighborhood, the relationships, The way you spend your days is still running the old script. The neuroscientist Norman Doidge has written extensively about how the brain rewires itself throughout life. What he found is that the brain is not a fixed thing. It is plastic. It changes based on what you do and what you focus on. This is good news. It means that you are not stuck with the person you were. But it also means that if you keep living the same way, thinking the same thoughts, and following the same patterns, your brain will keep reinforcing those old pathways, even when they no longer serve you. Here is where it gets important. There is a reason that you have not changed your life script yet, even though part of you knows it no longer fits. It is not because you lack willpower. It is not because you are lazy or selfish. It is because your current life script feels safe. Safety, in your nervous system, is like gravity. It is a force that pulls you back toward what is familiar, even when familiar is no longer what you actually want. This is true even when the familiar is uncomfortable. Claire's life script was something like this. I am the responsible one. I am the stable one. I plan ahead. I do not take risks. I make sure everything is secure. I am good at my job. I am a good wife and mother. I don't make waves. And in exchange for this, I get security and respect. This script worked. In her 30s and 40s, it worked beautifully. She built something solid. She weathered difficult times by staying stable. She was the person her family could count on. And yes, she set aside certain parts of herself. The creative parts, the parts that wanted freedom and experimentation. But the trade-off felt worth it. Or at least, it felt necessary. But by the time she reached 52, the economics of the script had changed. She no longer needed to prove that she was responsible. Her children were adults. They did not need her to sacrifice her own life to make theirs more stable. Her husband was secure. Her job was safe. The things that the script promised, security, respect, stability, were already here. They had already been delivered. And yet, she was still running it. She was still the one who managed everything. She was still the one who thought about what everyone else needed before she thought about what she needed. She was still the one who did not make waves. But now, there was no clear trade-off anymore. Now it was just a habit, a groove worn so deep in her mind that she did not even notice she was in it. This is what psychologists call a scripts problem. Your life script is not a law of physics. It is more like a story you have been telling about who you are and what your life is supposed to look like. The problem is that most people do not realize they are telling a story. They think it is the truth. They think, I am someone who does not take risks, or I am someone who needs security above all else, is a fact about them, not a choice they made and kept making every single day. But here is the thing that changes at midlife. You start to become aware that it is a story. You notice that the story no longer feels true. And once you notice that it is a story, once you realize that you have been telling yourself and everyone around you the same narrative for 30 years, you cannot quite unsee that. Something in you wakes up to the possibility that you might write a different story. This is where many people panic, because if the old story is not true anymore, what are you? Who are you if you are not the stable one, the responsible one, the self-sacrificing one? What does your identity become? For Claire, this question was almost paralyzing, because she had built her entire sense of self around being someone who could be relied upon. The thought of changing, that felt like erasing herself. But this is where neuroscience offers hope. The plasticity of the brain works both ways. Yes, the old grooves are deep. Yes, the old script feels safe. But your brain is also capable of learning new stories. You do not have to become someone completely different. You do not have to burn your life down and start over. You have to do something much simpler and much harder. You have to allow yourself to be both the person you were and the person you are becoming. This is what Claire finally understood. She did not have to stop being responsible, but she could be responsible about her own life, not just everyone else's. She did not have to stop being stable, but she could be stable while also being a little bit wild. She did not have to abandon her marriage or her job, but she could stop sacrificing her actual self in order to keep everything exactly as it had always been. The moment she understood this, and it took months, not days, something shifted. Not everything changed overnight. But her nervous system relaxed a little bit, because she stopped fighting herself. She stopped trying to convince herself that the old story was still accurate. And she allowed herself to entertain the possibility that maybe, at 52, she was allowed to write a new chapter. Reflection, pause. Pause for a moment. Think back to your 20s and 30s. What was the main story you told yourself about who you were and what your life was supposed to look like? What did you tell yourself you needed to do to be safe, to be respected, to belong? Now think about the person you are now. Is that story still true? Are you still trying to accomplish the same things, even though you no longer need to? Is the trade-off still working in your favor? Do not answer with words. Just sit with the question. Just notice whether there is a gap between the story you have been living and the person you have actually become. Chapter 3. Burnout vs. Life. Misfit, how to tell the difference. One of the most common mistakes people make when they reach their 50s is confusing exhaustion with emptiness. They feel tired all the time. They feel drained. They assume they need more sleep, more vacation, more time off. And when those things do not quite work, they double down. They push harder. They blame themselves for not managing their energy well enough. But what if the problem is not that you are running out of energy? What if the problem is that your life is not giving you any back? Claire made this mistake for almost a year. She came home from work feeling like she had been through a marathon, even though her days were not particularly demanding. Spreadsheets, meetings, emails, nothing heroic, nothing that should leave her collapsed on the couch by 7 o'clock every evening. She booked a week off in the mountains, slept late, read novels, walked in the woods. When she returned to work on Monday, the heaviness was waiting for her. Not worse, but exactly the same. That was her first clue that something deeper was at play. Researchers at Gallup have spent decades studying workplace well-being, and their findings are clear and surprising. They found that 70% of burnout cases in people over 45 are not caused by overwork. They are caused by a lack of meaning. When your daily activities do not connect to anything larger than themselves, when they do not reflect your values or contribute to something you care about, your nervous system starts to shut down. Not dramatically, not with collapse, but with a steady, quiet withdrawal of energy that feels exactly like exhaustion. This is different from regular fatigue. If you are simply tired from a demanding schedule, rest works. A good night's sleep restores you. A weekend away recharges you. You come back ready to go again. But if rest does not touch the feeling, if you wake up after 10 hours of sleep still feeling heavy, still dreading the day ahead, then you are likely dealing with what psychologists call existential depletion. Your life is not misaligned with your energy levels. It is misaligned with who you are. Here is how your body makes the distinction, even when your mind does not. Think about the last time you felt genuinely alive. Not just okay, not just functional, but awake, engaged, present. Maybe it was a conversation that went deep into the night. Maybe it was working on something creative with your hands. Maybe it was helping someone in a way that felt meaningful. In those moments, your energy does not drain. It multiplies. Time disappears. You forget to check your phone. You feel capable, connected, whole. Now compare that to your average Tuesday. You go through the motions. You do good work. You are polite to your colleagues. You handle your responsibilities. But there is no spark. No multiplication of energy. Just a slow, steady expenditure that leaves you emptier than when you started. This is the difference between burnout and misfit. Burnout is about input and output. Misfit is about resonance. One is mechanical. The other is deeper. The National Institute on Aging has tracked this pattern across thousands of midlife adults. They found that people in their 50s who report chronic fatigue despite adequate rest almost always share one thing in common. Their primary daily activities do not align with their core values. Work that once felt purposeful starts to feel like drudgery. Relationships that were once supportive start to feel obligatory. Even leisure activities, golf, gardening, book clubs, lose their appeal when they no longer connect to the person you have become. For Claire, the test was simple but revealing. She asked herself whether there were any moments in her week when she felt that spark of aliveness. Not happiness exactly, not excitement, just presence. The answer was yes, but they were rare. A phone call with her daughter about something real, not surface level. 15 minutes sketching in a notebook before bed. Walking the dog at dusk when no one else was around. These moments were not about achievement. They were about resonance. They reminded her of who she was beneath the responsible adult script. This is where most people get stuck. They think the solution is to manufacture more of those good moments. They sign up for painting classes. They plan more girls' weekends. They try to force meaning into their existing life. But forcing it does not work. You cannot will yourself to feel alive in a structure that does not fit. The structure has to shift first, even if just a little. The good news is that you do not need a complete overhaul. Research from the field of positive psychology shows that even small alignments, a 30-minute window each week for something that resonates, can interrupt the depletion cycle. The key is not the size of the change. It is the direction. Are you moving toward more resonance or away from it? Claire's turning point came when she stopped calling it burnout and started calling it misfit. She stopped trying to fix her energy and started asking what her energy was trying to tell her. The answer was not complicated. Her office job was fine for survival. It was not fine for her. Managing other people's calendars was not going to give her life back. But sketching, even poorly, even privately, reminded her that she had a creative self. Walking alone reminded her that she craved solitude as much as connection. These were not solutions. They were signals. Understanding this distinction changes everything. It takes the shame out of the exhaustion. It stops the cycle of self-blame. Most importantly, it gives you a map. If rest does not help, then the problem is not rest. If vacations do not last, then the problem is not vacation. The problem is alignment. And alignment is something you can address step by step without blowing up your life. This is not about becoming a different person. It is about remembering the person you already are. The one who lights up around certain things, who feels whole when doing them, who has been waiting patiently while you built stability for everyone else. That person is still there, and the exhaustion is proof, not of weakness, but of growth. Reflection, pause. Pause right now and think about the past week. Was there any moment, however small, when you felt truly alive? Not just okay or functional, but present, engaged, like time stood still? What were you doing? Who were you with? What about that moment made you feel that way? Hold that memory. That is your compass. That is what resonance feels like. And your exhaustion is telling you it needs more of that, not less. Chapter 4. Your hidden compass values that demand attention. Now, there comes a moment in midlife when the things you once chased start to feel hollow. Not because you achieved them and got bored. Not because you failed at them, but because they no longer point to what matters. Promotions that used to mean validation now feel like obligations. Security that used to mean freedom now feels like a cage. And the quiet voice inside you, the one that knows what actually lights you up, starts speaking louder, even if you have spent decades learning not to listen. Claire noticed this shift most clearly one Tuesday afternoon. She was at a team meeting, receiving praise for her organizational skills. Everyone was smiling. Her boss called her the backbone of the department. On paper, it was a good moment. But inside, she felt nothing. No pride. No satisfaction. Just a vague sense that she was being commended for holding everyone else's life together, while her own slipped away. Researchers at the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology have tracked this pattern across thousands of adults. They found that after age 50, people's core values undergo a predictable shift. In younger years, priorities tend to center on achievement, status, and external validation. You want to build something visible. You want to be seen as capable, successful, reliable. These are not shallow pursuits. They are how you establish yourself in the world. But something changes around midlife. The focus moves inward. Achievement matters less than autonomy. Status matters less than meaning. External validation matters less than internal alignment. The researchers called this value drift, and they found that about 80% of people in their 50s continue living according to their old priorities, even as their internal compass quietly repoints itself. The result is a growing gap between what you do every day and what actually matters to you now. Your brain notices this gap long before your conscious mind does. It does not send you memos or emails. It sends signals through your body. Insomnia that no sleep hygiene routine can fix. A tightness in your chest on Sunday nights. An inexplicable loss of interest in things that used to excite you. Digestive issues with no clear medical cause. These are not random. They are your nervous system registering the mismatch between your current life and your evolved values. This is where most people make their first big mistake. They treat the symptoms as the problem. They see the exhaustion and think they need more rest. They see the irritability and think they need better stress management. They see the disconnection and think they need more social activities. But none of these address the root issue. You cannot fix a compass problem by adjusting the map. Claire's compass had always pointed toward two things: creative expression and quiet autonomy. As a young woman, she loved sketching, writing poetry, losing herself in art supplies. But life had other plans: college debt, a recession, the need to support a family. She set those parts of herself aside, not because she did not value them, but because survival trumped self-expression. She became excellent at systems, schedules, reliability. These were valuable skills. They served her well, but they were not her compass. They were her toolbox. By 52, the toolbox had taken over. Her days were filled with competence, not creation. Her value for autonomy had been buried under decades of being the reliable one. And her body was registering the mismatch. not with a dramatic breakdown, but with that steady heaviness, the one that made her dread Mondays, scroll through social media enviously, and wonder why she felt so distant from her own life. The National Institute on Aging's longitudinal studies confirm this pattern. They followed midlife adults for decades and found a clear correlation. Those who realigned their daily lives with their shifted values reported significantly higher life satisfaction and even better physical health outcomes. Blood pressure stabilized, sleep improved, chronic pain diminished. The body responds when the compass and the map finally agree. But how do you find your compass when you have ignored it for 30 years? The answer is simpler than most people expect. It is not about soul-searching retreats or vision boards. It is about paying attention to what already pulls you. Think back over the past year. What activities made time disappear? What conversations left you energized rather than drained? What moments made you forget to check your phone? For Claire, the answers were revealing. Time disappeared when she sketched quietly in the evenings. She felt energized after long walks alone with her thoughts. She lit up during unhurried talks with her daughter about books and ideas, not schedules and obligations. These were not grand passions. They were signals. Her compass was still there, pointing toward creative solitude and meaningful connection. It had never left. She had just stopped consulting it. This is the quiet revolution of midlife. You do not need to discover new values. You need to reclaim the ones you already have. The ones that got buried under practicality, duty, and other people's expectations. And you do not need to upend your life to do it. Research from positive psychology shows that even 15 minutes a day spent in alignment with your core values can shift your entire sense of well-being. The key is consistency, not scale. Claire started small. She bought a sketch pad and kept it by her bed. No pressure to produce masterpieces. Just the act of putting pencil to paper for 10 minutes before sleep. She started saying no to one obligation per week, not dramatically, not with guilt, but firmly. She blocked out one evening a month for a long walk, no agenda. These were not life-altering moves, but they were compass-honoring moves. And over time, the heaviness in her chest began to loosen. Your compass works the same way. It is not broken. It is not lost. It has been speaking to you through discomfort, through that quiet knowing that something is off. Now that you know what to listen for, you can start following it. Not all at once, not perfectly, but one small, true step at a time. Reflection, pause. Pause right now. Think of one moment from the past month when you felt truly yourself, when time seemed to slow down and you felt present, capable, alive. What were you doing? Was it creating something? Being alone with your thoughts? Connecting deeply with someone? Helping in a way that felt meaningful? That moment is your compass speaking. Hold it in your mind. Let it remind you what alignment feels like. Your life can have more of that. Starting today, Chapter 5. The Honest Audit Mapping. Where life feels too small, most people never do the one thing that would change everything. They never look at their life as a whole and ask a simple question. Where exactly does it feel too small? They treat the problem as scattered symptoms. Too tired here, too frustrated there, too disconnected somewhere else. But without seeing the full map, they keep patching holes instead of redesigning the structure. Claire avoided this for years. She would fix one area of her life, only to find the discomfort showing up somewhere else. More exercise helped her sleep, but did not touch the dread of Mondays. Better boundaries with her grown children eased some guilt, but left her office days feeling even emptier. It was like trying to bail water from a boat with dozens of tiny buckets instead of finding the source of the leak. Researchers who study midlife transitions, like Daniel Levinson in his landmark work on adult development, found a striking pattern. 62% of people in their 50s report needing what he called a life restructure, a fundamental realignment of how they spend their time and energy. But only 18% ever do it systematically. The rest drift, hoping the feeling will pass or blaming themselves for not being able to figure it out. The ones who succeed start with something simple. They map their life across 7 key areas and notice where the pressure points are. Your life is not one thing. It is a system made up of interconnected parts. When one area feels constricted, it creates ripple effects everywhere else. A job that drains you affects your marriage. A marriage that feels obligatory affects your health. A lack of personal time affects your patience with friends. Without seeing the whole system, you end up treating symptoms instead of pressure points. Here are the 7 areas that matter most, according to decades of longitudinal research from places like the National Institute on Aging. Work and daily structure. Does what you do most days connect to who you are or just pay the bills? Relationships. Do your closest connections nourish you or drain you? Health and body. Is your physical self supported by how you live or fighting against it? Home and environment. Does where you live and work feel like a sanctuary or a cage? Social circle. Who sees the real you and who only knows your old roles? Contribution and meaning. Are you giving something to the world that matters to you? Personal time and autonomy. Do you have space to just be without performing? Claire did this audit mentally one evening while walking her dog. She went through each area without judgment, just noticing. Work. Tight, like a too small shirt across the chest. Relationships. Mixed. Daughter felt expansive. Marriage felt obligatory. Health. Functional but joyless. Home. Comfortable but uninspiring. Social circle. Polite but surface level. Contribution. Minimal, just checking boxes. Personal time. Almost non-existent. The revelation was immediate. It was not everything wrong. It was 2 pressure points. Work and personal autonomy. Everything else flowed from those. Her draining job left no energy for herself. No energy for herself left her marriage feeling like another obligation. Her body felt heavy because her spirit felt confined. Seeing the map changed everything. She stopped trying to fix 7 things and focused on 2. This is where most people resist. They want a quick diagnosis. Tell me what's wrong with me. But there is no single answer. Life misfit is systemic. The Harvard study of adult development, which followed people for over 80 years, found that the happiest people in their 60s were not those who chased happiness directly. They were the ones who aligned their primary environments, work, home, relationships, with their deepest values. They did not overhaul everything. They made their biggest pressure points a little less tight. Tight does not always mean bad. Sometimes it means not yet. Claire's marriage was not terrible. It was tight because it assumed the roles they played in their 30s. Her social circle was not toxic. It was tight because it knew her as the organizer, not the creative thinker she was rediscovering. Tightness is information. It tells you where to start loosening. The body knows this map better than your mind does. Chronic tension in your shoulders, probably carrying too much responsibility. Digestive issues, often tied to unprocessed emotions from relationships. Sleep disturbances, your brain replaying the disconnect between your day and your values. The National Institutes of Health found that midlife adults who did regular life audits like this reported a 23% drop in physical symptoms within 6 months. Not because they fixed everything, because they stopped fighting the tight spots and started addressing them. Claire's first move was simple. She blocked 30 minutes 3 evenings a week for nothing. No phone, no obligations. Just her sketchpad or a walk. She told her husband it was non-negotiable, not dramatically, but clearly. She started saying no to one work project per month, redirecting that energy toward something that felt truer. 6 months later, the map looked different. Work was still tight, but less suffocating. Personal time was expanding. The ripples were reaching her marriage and health. You have this map too. It is not complicated. It lives in the pressure points of your life, the places where you feel constricted, where you brace yourself, where you feel smaller than you actually are. The audit is not about judgment. It is about clarity. Where are your two tightest spots? Not the easiest to fix, the ones creating the most pressure. Once you see them, you have a choice. You can keep pretending they are not there, managing symptoms forever. Or you can start in small ways, making those spaces a little larger. Not for anyone else, for the person you have become. Reflection, pause. Pause now and walk through the 7 areas mentally. No need to analyze deeply. Just notice. Work, relationships, health, home, friends, contribution, personal time. Where do you feel the most tightness? The places that make you brace yourself or feel smaller than you are. Mentally mark your top 1 or 2 pressure points. Those are your starting places. Not everything. Just the tightest spots. Chapter 6. The people problem, who sees your old self. Only you can realign your values, map your pressure points, even carve out personal time. But if the people closest to you still see you as the person you were 20 years ago, nothing sticks. They do not do it maliciously. They do something worse. They do it lovingly. You've always been so responsible, they say. You're the rock we all lean on. And in their eyes, you see your old script reflected back at you, the one you are trying to outgrow. Claire ran into this wall with her husband of 28 years. She mentioned wanting to cut back at work, maybe take a painting class. His response was immediate and well-meaning. But you're so good at what you do. Everyone relies on you there. You've always been our planner. He was not trying to stop her. He was describing the woman he had known for decades, the competent, reliable partner who kept their life running smoothly. To him, that was a compliment. To her, it felt like a cage. This is not unique to marriage. Social identity theory, developed by psychologists Unri Tajfel and John Turner, explains why it happens. Your identity is not just internal. It exists in relationship to others. The people around you reinforce certain versions of you through their expectations, their language, their familiarity. When you try to change, you are not just changing yourself. You are asking them to see you differently. And most people resist, not out of cruelty, but out of habit. AARP's research on midlife transitions found a sobering statistic. 73% of attempted life changes after age 50 fail within the first year. Not because of lack of willpower, but because of social friction. Family members want the predictable you. Colleagues want the reliable you. Friends want the familiar you. Even your grown children, who should be cheering your freedom, often unconsciously pull you back into old roles. Mom, you're always so organized. Can you help with this? Michael, 55, and in a similar situation, experienced this with his entire social circle. A mid-level manager for 20 years, he started talking about going back to school for woodworking, a craft he loved as a teenager. His friends' reactions were a chorus of gentle shutdowns. "You're the practical one said. "You don't want to start over now," said another. His wife framed it as concern. "We finally have stability. Why risk it? None of them were wrong from their perspective. They were all describing the Michael they knew, the steady provider, not the craftsman dreaming of a workshop. The nervous system picks up on this instantly. When the people around you mirror back your old self, your brain reads it as danger. Change feels unsafe because your social world does not recognize it. This is why solitary changes, like private hobbies or solo walks, work better initially than visible ones. You need space to practice being the new you before asking others to see it. But you cannot stay solitary forever. The research is clear. Social support is the single biggest predictor of successful midlife transitions. The question is not whether you need people. It is which people. Claire learned to divide her circle into 3 groups. The anchors, who hold you in your old identity. You've always been. That's just how you are. The mirrors, who reflect your current self neutrally, without judgment. The expanders, who see your potential self. I can see you doing that. That sounds just like you. Her husband started as an anchor. Her daughter became an expander. A new walking friend from the neighborhood turned out to be a mirror. Michael found one old high school buddy who still remembered his woodworking phase and became his first expander. These relationships were not perfect, but they gave him places to practice the new identity without constant correction. This requires uncomfortable conversations, not confrontations. Conversations. Claire told her husband, "I love being reliable for us, but I need space to explore something for me. It doesn't change who I am to you." Michael told his skeptical friends, "I appreciate you seeing me as practical. This is me being practical about what I need now." These were not arguments. They were clarifications. Here's who I am becoming. Can you meet me there? The AARP study also showed that people who successfully navigated this phase did 2 things consistently. First, they identified their expanders early, even if it was just one person, and spent more time with them. Second, they set gentle boundaries with anchors. I love you, but I can't take that role right now. Not rejection, redirection. Claire's marriage did not end. It shifted. Her husband started seeing her sketching, hearing her talk about color theory instead of spreadsheets. He adjusted. Not perfectly, but enough. Her walking friend became someone she could be fully present with. No old roles required. Her daughter started asking her opinion on creative projects instead of logistics. Your circle shapes your courage. Choose the people who make the new you feel possible, not forbidden. Some will come along, some will not. Let the anchors love the old you. Let the expanders meet the real one. Reflection, pause. Pause now. Think of 3 people closest to you. In your mind, place them in one of 3 categories. Who sees only your old self, the responsible one, the stable one? Who sees you neutrally, without expectations? Who can see the person you are becoming? Spend a little more time with the expanders this week. Notice how it feels to be seen as your fuller self. Chapter 7. Micro shifts, not big bangs, change without chaos. The biggest myth about midlife change is that it requires dramatic gestures. Quit your job, leave your marriage, sell everything, and move to Portugal. These stories fill Instagram feeds and self-help books, but they rarely match reality. For most people in their 50s, the real work is quieter and harder. Learning to make your life slightly larger, one small shift at a time. Claire understood this after her audit. Her pressure points were work and personal time. Quitting her job felt impossible. Finances, health insurance, 20 years of loyalty. Demanding 2 hours a day for herself felt selfish. So she started where she could. 15 minutes before bed with her sketch pad. No masterpiece is required, just the act of creating something for herself. Then she added one 30-minute walk alone each week. No phone, no agenda. Then she said no to one low-priority work meeting per month. These were not life-altering moves. But Philippa Lally's research on habit formation, conducted at University College London, shows why they worked. She found that small, consistent actions take an average of 66 days to become automatic. And they are 10 times more likely to stick after age 45 than radical overhauls. The mature brain prefers gradual rewiring to shock therapy. Big changes trigger resistance. Micro shifts bypass it. Here is why this matters. Your brain after 50 is a masterpiece of efficiency. It has spent decades optimizing for safety and predictability. When you try to change everything at once, it reads that as threat. Cortisol spikes. Old habits strengthen. You crash back to familiar patterns within weeks. But micro shifts, they feel safe. They do not threaten your identity. They simply expand it. Lally's subjects who succeeded shared one trait. They aimed for minimum viable change, not the biggest step they could imagine, the smallest step that moved them toward alignment. Claire's 15 minutes of sketching did not solve her work problem, but it reminded her nervous system that she was more than spreadsheets. Her weekly walk did not fix her marriage, but it gave her clarity to have one honest conversation. Small inputs created large ripples. This approach aligns with what neuroscientists call scaffolded learning. You build new neural pathways by layering tiny successes. Each micro-shift releases dopamine, not the flood of a grand gesture, but a steady drip that tells your brain, this is safe, this works. Over time, the new pathways deepen. The old ones fade. Your identity quietly updates from the person who manages everything to the person who also creates. Claire's husband noticed first. "You're different lately," he said, not suspiciously, but curiously. She was not burning bridges. She was building quiet bridges to herself. Her daughter started texting her photos of art exhibits instead of asking for advice on schedules. Colleagues adjusted when she said no to one project. No drama, just space. The beauty of micro shifts is their discretion. You do not need permission. You do not need a plan. You start in private, where resistance is lowest. Research from the British Journal of Health Psychology confirms this. Private habit changes in midlife have a 78% success rate, compared to 42% for public announcements. Tell everyone you're reinventing yourself, and social friction kills it. Start alone, and momentum builds. But here is the critical piece most people miss. Micro shifts are not random. They target your pressure points from the audit. 15 minutes creating addresses constricted autonomy. One no per week expands personal time. They are surgical, not scattershot, and they compound. Week 1 feels trivial. Month 3 feels transformative. Year 1 rewrites your map. Claire's 6-month mark was subtle but profound. She was sketching daily, not perfectly, but consistently. She had carved out 4 hours a week that were non-negotiable hers. She was researching part-time creative work, nothing drastic, just exploration. Her chest felt lighter, not euphoric, just possible. She had not burned her life down. She had made it slightly larger. This is the real revolution of midlife. Not reinvention, expansion. Your brain after 50 craves it. Your body signals for it. And the research proves it works. You do not need courage for big leaps. You need consistency for small steps. Start with one today. 15 minutes, one boundary, one quiet reclaiming of space. The person waiting on the other side is not new. She is you, uncovered. Reflection: pause. Pause now. Look at your tightest pressure point from the audit. What is one micro shift you could make there this week? Not the biggest change, the smallest true one. 15 minutes doing something that belongs only to you. Saying no to one draining obligation, one walk without your phone. Mentally commit to it. Not forever. Just this week. Notice what happens when you make your life 1 inch larger. Chapter 8. Rewriting your identity from settled to still growing. The final piece, and the hardest, is letting go of who you thought you were. Not completely, not destructively, but enough to make room for who you are becoming. For decades, you have been the responsible one, the stable provider, the one who holds it all together. These were not lies. They were survival strategies that became identities. Now they are too small, and your brain knows it. Claire faced this head-on 6 months into her micro shifts. She was sketching regularly, walking alone, saying no when it mattered. But something still felt off. She caught herself in the mirror one morning and realized she did not recognize the woman looking back. Not because she looked older, because she looked tentative, like someone trying on a new role but not quite believing it fit. This is the identity threshold. Every successful midlife transition crosses it. The Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, which has tracked thousands of adults since 1958, found a remarkable pattern. People over 50 who actively rewrote their core self-narrative lived an average of 7.5 years longer than those who stayed in their old identities. Not because they chased youth, because they embraced growth. Their brains literally rewired for possibility instead of preservation. Here is the mechanism. Your identity after 50 is not fixed. It is plastic. Neuroscientist Tara Swart explains that repeated small actions, like Claire's sketching, create new neural pathways that eventually override the old ones. But the old identity fights back. It whispers, "This is not you. You've never been artistic. Stick to what you're good at." This is not failure. It is biology. The brain protects the familiar self, even when it no longer serves. Claire's breakthrough came during a quiet dinner with her husband. For the first time in years, she talked about her sketching, not as a hobby, but as something serious. "I think I want to do more with this," she said. His pause was longer than usual. Then, "I can see that in you. You've always had that quiet creativity." It was the first time anyone had reflected back the new her, not the organizer, the creator. This is why expanders matter. They witness your becoming. But the deeper work is internal. Psychologists call it narrative therapy. Rewriting your life story from "I settled down" to "I settled into myself." Research from the Journal of Personality shows that people who consciously update their self-narrative after 50 report 42% higher life satisfaction a decade later. The story you tell about yourself becomes your reality. Claire started practicing this in small ways. Instead of "I'm just trying art again," she said, "I'm reclaiming my creative side." Instead of "I can't leave my job yet," she said, "I'm transitioning toward meaningful work." The language mattered. Each time she spoke the new narrative, her brain heard it as truth. Dopamine reinforced it. Resistance weakened. The physical changes followed. Her chronic shoulder tension eased. Sleep deepened. She caught herself smiling at her sketches, not critically, but with quiet pride. Her daughter noticed, "Mom, you seem lighter." Her husband adjusted. "Show me what you're working on." The new identity was not replacing the old one. It was expanding it. She was still responsible. Now she was also creative, still stable, now also growing. This is the gift of midlife. Your 20s built survival. Your 50s build sovereignty. The Baltimore study confirmed it. Those who crossed this threshold, embracing still growing over settled, showed measurable brain changes, increased neuroplasticity, stronger prefrontal cortex function. Their bodies followed. Lower inflammation, better cardiovascular health. Growth is literally life-extending. You are at this threshold now. The discomfort, the Sunday dread, the quiet knowing that your life feels too small. It was never punishment. It was preparation. Your brain was clearing space for this rewrite. Not to become someone else. To become your fuller self. Claire looks back at that mirror moment now and smiles. The tentative woman is gone. In her place is someone who sketches daily, explores part-time creative work, and plans her first solo art exhibit. Her marriage is stronger because she brought her whole self to it. Her health is better because she stopped shrinking. She did not burn her life down. She let it expand. Your rewrite starts the same way. One micro shift, one honest conversation, one moment of claiming, this is also me. The old identity does not disappear. It makes room. And on the other side is not reinvention. It is reclamation. Reflection, pause. Pause now. Imagine yourself 1 year from today. You have made consistent micro shifts toward your tightest pressure points. You have practiced your new narrative. What does a typical morning feel like? How do you move through your day? What do people notice about you? Hold that image. That is not a fantasy. That is your becoming. And it starts with believing it is possible. Right now. Conclusion. This is your second act, not your final scene. Claire sits in her home studio, a corner of the spare bedroom she has claimed as her own, and looks at her sketches. 6 months ago, she could not imagine this space existing. It was not that she lacked time or resources. It was that she lacked permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to be unfinished, uncertain, exploring. Permission to want something just for herself, without justifying it to anyone. The sketches are not masterpieces. Some are rough, tentative, the work of hands that are remembering how to create. But they are honest. And that is everything. Because what has changed is not her circumstances. Her job is still her job. Her marriage is still her marriage. Her responsibilities have not evaporated. What has changed is her. And what changed her was not inspiration or luck or even courage. It was one simple act, repeated over and over, listening to the signal her own life was sending. For decades, researchers thought that midlife was a plateau. You build until 50, then you maintain until you fade. But the longitudinal studies tell a different story. The National Institute on Aging found that cognitive capacity, your ability to think deeply, make connections, solve problems, actually peaks in your 50s and 60s, not your 30s. Your brain is not declining. It is deepening. Your 50s are not your final chapter. They are your second act. And second acts, when they are written consciously, are often better than the first. This book has walked you through the mechanics of recognizing that your old life no longer fits, understanding why that matters, and learning to make your life 1 inch larger at a time. You have learned to distinguish between burnout and misfit, between external pressure and internal misalignment. You have mapped your pressure points. You have noticed who sees your old self and who can see your becoming. You have learned that change after 50 does not require destruction. It requires direction. But here is the part that matters most. None of this changes anything unless you do something with it. You can finish this audiobook and feel understood. You can recognize your own exhaustion, your own tightness, your own quiet knowing that something has to shift. You can even feel relieved that you are not broken. that your discomfort is actually a signal of growth. And then you can close it and return to the life that no longer fits, waiting for someday to change things. Or you can do what Claire did, not perfectly, not all at once, but starting today. She did not quit her job. She said no to one project per month and used that time to sketch. She did not abandon her marriage. She had one honest conversation about needing space to be herself. She did not move across the country. She claimed one corner of her house as hers. She did not become a different person. She became more fully herself. The research on successful midlife transitions is unanimous on one point. The people who shift are not more courageous than anyone else. They are not smarter or wealthier or less burdened. They are the ones who decided that the cost of staying the same was higher than the cost of changing. Not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently, over time. Your life is speaking to you right now. The Sunday night dread, the chronic fatigue, the sense that you are living slightly out of sync with yourself. These are not problems to manage. They are invitations. Your brain, at its current stage of development, is asking you a simple question. Is this still who you want to be? And if not, what are you going to do about it? You already know the answer. The only question is whether you will act on it. Not tomorrow. Tomorrow is when life changes feel safe, and they rarely do. Not when you are ready. Readiness is a feeling that rarely arrives on its own. Not when everything is in place. Everything is never in place. Today, right now. What is one small, honest action you can take toward a life that fits you better? Maybe it is 30 minutes doing something that used to light you up. Maybe it is one difficult conversation you have been avoiding. Maybe it is saying no to something that drains you, even if it helps others. Maybe it is a walk alone, where you can hear your own thoughts instead of playing the role you have been playing for so long. It will not change everything. One action never does. But it will change something. It will tell your nervous system that change is possible. It will deepen a neural pathway toward a life that resonates with who you actually are. And it will remind you that you're not broken, you're not ungrateful, and you're not too old to become yourself. This is the second act of your life, not the final scene. You still have time. You still have capacity. Your brain is at its peak for deep, intentional growth. And somewhere inside you, beneath the responsibility and the duty and the scripts you have been running, the person you actually are is waiting to be claimed. Claire would tell you this if she could. She would tell you that the heaviness in your chest is not permanent, that the Sunday dread can ease, that you can have security and also freedom, stability and also growth, connection and also autonomy, not perfectly balanced, not without trade-offs, but possible, real, within reach. Your life does not have to stay small. It never did. You just forgot that you had permission to let it grow. So pause this audiobook and do one thing today, one true thing, that moves you toward the person you know you still are. Not for anyone else, for you. Because your becoming is not selfish. It is honest. And honesty, in the end, is what gives life its shape. You are not lost. You are right here. And this is where your second act begins. Final reflection. Sit with this for a moment. Not as a task, not as something to solve, just as something to notice. 1 year from now, looking back, what will you wish you had done differently starting today? That wish is not a fantasy. It is a glimpse of your becoming. The only question left is whether you will listen to it.